Listen, the world is a scary place. Yes. It's chaotic. Yes. But you have so much control over one thing, and it's called your life. You have control over how you react to situations. You have control of how you're doing in your classes in college. So while I was in college, I was getting straight A's because I wanted to take control over my future and my destiny. I didn't want to be a victim of circumstances. Not that the circumstances were stacked against me, but all these people were constantly telling me that they were. Hey guys, welcome to the Re-Education Camps. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Olivia.
And this is the first inaugural episode of the Undoctrination podcast. Olivia is in town in Atlanta. It's not your first time in Atlanta, right?
No, my last time I was here was actually my first time meeting you when I had a layover back home. I was flying, I believe, from California to DC. I had a random layover in Atlanta, and I tweeted, what do I do in my 4-hour layover, 3-hour layover in Atlanta? And you tweeted back, oh, let's get lunch. And I was like, okay. And everybody was yelling at me. Everyone was like, stay at the airport. The airport is crazy. You'll never make it back in time. Well, we made it back in time.
We made it back in time.
And I'm glad I met you because this kind of, it just snowballed into what we're doing now, which is a podcast for a fee, which is like amazing.
It is amazing. And it's been in the works, for those who don't know, for probably 2 months now. And kind of the original idea was that, you know, they say that there are a lot of libertarian podcasts, and I'm sure we'll get familiar groans of, oh no, not another libertarian podcast. But there is something pretty vital missing from the libertarian podcast space, and that is two girls who came to this movement kind of on their own, helping to shepherd the lost sheep into this movement.
And I am one of those sheep. And I think it's about learning and growing together, because we're all in the gulag right now. Like, we are also in the re-education camp. Yes. And I want to bring people along, you know, for the ride, for the journey, because I feel like I've gone on a great transformation in my ideology from being completely uninterested in politics to being very uneducated on politics and thinking I knew everything.
Right.
To now realizing that I don't know everything, but I'm still smarter than I've ever been. You know, I know more about politics than I ever have at this current moment in time. But I feel like the more you accept that you don't know, the more that you're going to find out. Yeah. And so I feel like that's really at the core of the show, at least for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important to approach politics in a humble way with like a student mentality, because it's true, we really don't know everything. And so, you know, I'm super interested to hear your entire life story. No, I'm just kidding. But I think this intro episode is a great way for us to kind of show some of the people who've been following us on social media for a long time how we even got our start, because a lot of people don't know that. And you initially were a conservative, right?
And I would not even shy away from describing myself as a conservative now, just because the term is so broad these days. I mean, there's like nationalist conservatives, there's libertarian conservatives, there's social conservatives, fiscal conservatives. So I would describe myself more as a conservatarian. What I would probably have fitted into back when I first got into politics, which was during the 2016 election, and to age myself, I believe that was my freshman year of high school.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. I think, so the actual election was in November. So I guess like the beginning of sophomore year.
So you weren't even able to vote the first time Donald Trump
No, but I was very opinioned. I was very opinionated.
As are we all at 16.
Yeah, I thought I knew it all. I really thought I knew it all. And for context, I went to, or at least for the first 2 years of high school, I went to a very white rural high school in Maryland. And I was also on the wrestling team. So I was like one of the very few minorities in the school in general, the few black people in the school in general. and then one of the only females in this school's history. I think now there's been more, but at the time it was like it was pretty rare. It was very rare, and especially in the state of Maryland where girls wrestling is still not sanctioned. So we had to compete against boys, but that's a whole other conversation because that was insane. But this is all to say that the majority of my friends were like white males who grew up in a very rural conservative town. And, contrary to popular belief, I wasn't lynched, I wasn't murdered, I wasn't hate crimed. I actually had a really positive time with those types of friends, and I still have lasting friendships from that team and from that school today. But what caused me to kind of be interested in politics was the fact that they were talking about voting for Trump, and this was me fresh off of my Tumblr phase. Okay, we all went through it. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Been there. So this was me fresh off my middle school Tumblr phase. I'm walking in there like Donald Trump's a racist. I really don't know nothing about him. I didn't even know him from The Apprentice. I was too young to even watch him on The Apprentice. All I knew was that he was a racist old white guy. Mm-hmm. And all my friends on the wrestling team, all these white dudes who treated me with respect, who treated me like a friend, who weren't racist to me, were talking about voting for him. And I was like, I was almost beside myself. I was like, is my whole life a lie?
That's very interesting. So are you saying that conservatives can be nice people?
Apparently, that was like my first time figuring that out, honestly.
Because as teenagers, we both thought like, oh my gosh, anyone who believes in capitalism is literally sent from hell.
I was like a pronoun defender. Like I never like switched my own pronouns, but like I would be on Tumblr being like, respect their like I was literally that person when I was like 13, 14. So I did a complete 180. And so I have these friends. I go home to my dad. For those who don't know, my dad's a black man, and I didn't grow up in a very political household, so I did not know my father's political beliefs growing up. So I come home and I'm like, these kids are talking about voting for Trump. Like, this is crazy. Like, all I've heard is that he's a racist. And my dad's looking at me like I'm crazy. He literally looked at me and was like, I'm going to vote for Trump. And so I was like,
yeah, mind blown.
I was like, what?
This was Olivia Rondeau's red pill moment.
This was my red pill. This was my like initial red pill moment. I've since been red pilled like multiple times since then, but this was my initial red pill moment. And so I started to do research. I was a smart kid, so I was like, at least I'm going to do my due diligence. If something that I previously thought has turned out to be wrong, I'm going to do my research. And I researched a lot into Trump's opponent. And in that election, it was Hillary Clinton. And I researched a lot into the DNC. And so at the time, this was a huge tangent to say, at the time, I was less of a conservative in terms of principles, but kind of reactionary against the left. And I started, I go into the YouTube wormhole of like, Ben Shapiro destroys college. So that's the kind of content I was watching at the time, which
fair enough because I used to watch that content too.
But it's definitely the pipeline to like the real intellectual dark web,
Right. I think that actually points out something really interesting, that so many people that consider themselves conservatives, I find, are just simply reactionary, right? There's not much that they do stand for, right? There's not much thought and research
at the time. I couldn't even tell you why I had the opinions that I had. So the way I was raised, like I said, was not political, but I did grow up in a gun shooting household, a very, I would say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps household, religious household. So for all intents and purposes, I was raised as a conservative, although I was not told to vote Republican.
So with the values.
Yeah, those conservative values. So it wasn't 100% reactionary because I still had a lot of those values instilled in me despite going through my Tumblr phase. Like I was never anti-gun and I was never like a feminist, which really confused even the Tumblr kids at the time because I was like, you have to respect she, her, they, its pronouns. But I was not a feminist just because I grew up. I grew up doing for myself, and I grew up being kind of like the independent woman, but not complaining about men and not really not really feeling like there was inequality that I had no control over. Like I wasn't gonna be oppressed in that way. And I still don't really consider myself a feminist until it comes to biological males and women's sports, which is a topic I'm very passionate about today. But I supported things that I couldn't defend. Like I was a big like thin blue line person. I guess I would say, like, I would literally use the hashtag like thin blue line at 17 years old, not really knowing anything about police unions, not knowing anything about qualified immunity, not knowing anything about the things that I know now about criminal justice reform. And that's not saying ACAB, I'm not saying I did a 180, but I look at the situation with more nuance, and I'm not looking at police,
skepticism, right?
Much more skepticism. I'm not looking at police as a protected class necessarily, as a lot of MAGA supporters did, at least at the time. Now it's maybe different following the Capitol incident. But at the time, it was very like bootlicky.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's so weird to see conservatives do a 180 within a year.
Yeah, I'm glad for them, but
to be more skeptical of government agencies and the agencies that enforce the laws that are lawmakers who are not very bright, write and pass. Yeah, that's so interesting that you came from that side, because I came from like a completely different side.
Do tell.
It's so embarrassing too, because now I look at the situation I was in as a preteen and teenager and where I was politically, and I'm pulling my hair out. Like, how could you believe any of this stuff? How could you think this? But I would say where I was at when I was a teenager gives me a lot more sympathy for where teenagers are today, right? Whereas I think a lot of people within the reactionary conservative space kind of belittle and mock people that are going through this. I get it.
And that's not going to bring them to their side.
Yeah. I was, a very socially awkward, socially anxious kid. I had been bullied pretty badly, which, like, whatever, boohoo. But at the time, it definitely affected my self-esteem. So I fell in with this crowd of kind of I wouldn't call them the weirdos, but like the socially outcast in high school. And it made me feel better to be around people that I thought, were kind of like me. But through a lot of these people is how I was introduced to the social justice movement. And I think 2 years older than you. So I was coming up around the time that all of this was just starting to gain steam. So all of the pronouns discourse that you see nowadays, that was starting to make its waves when we were on Tumblr.
People don't even give respect to their elders.
Yeah.
They act like it's the TikTok kids. No, they were neo-pronouns on Tumblr like 10 years ago.
10 years ago, okay? That's what all of these SJW cringe compilations came out of, right? People who were educated on Tumblr by other kids, I guess.
And kind of creepy older adults, honestly. I feel like
there was some grooming going on.
There was a huge, like this, I mean, I think conservatives today have a point with creepy older adults kind of grooming or quote unquote indoctrinating younger kids into whatever their particular ideology is.
And listen, it was so easy for me because when I was either 13 or 14, I was in Catholic school at the time. And my mom gets married to a woman.
That's how they get you.
I know. I had to fly across the United States because it wasn't legal in Louisiana where I was at the time. And that was an experience in and of itself. It made no sense to me why, under the state law, that they couldn't get married in Louisiana but could in Massachusetts. And I was in Catholic school at the time, right? And so, I have much more nuanced views about that now, being a Catholic that's come back. But at the time, I was angry. I was very, very angry. And a lot of people on Tumblr were talking about gay marriage. It hadn't. The Supreme Court
the day I
hadn't
found out that they had ruled on it, and I found out from Tumblr.
Why is it so integral to our stories?
I haven't logged on to Tumblr in like literally years, but at the time it was such
I don't even want to.
It was like how kids use TikTok all the time. That's basically what it was. Like kids were just on there.
Yeah, and like once gay marriage was legal everywhere, it was kind of like that subsection of the internet went, okay, what's next?
Right.
Where do we pour all of this energy into?
Right.
And it got poured into this, like, these different intersectional, social movements.
Intersectionality.
Right?
And I mean, I'll be the one to say it, gender ideology. And they were so set on saying that the slippery slope is a conservative myth.
Right.
And I'm one of the people that reluctantly believes in the slippery slope because I hate that it exists. Yeah. I would love for it to be, gay rights, equal rights for everybody. And that's it. We don't have to fight no more. We don't have to create these crazy ideologies and intersectional systems anymore.
It could be that, but I think we're a very prosperous country because of capitalism, right? We are an incredibly prosperous country, and I think people are encountering new kinds of hardships based on the internet, and I think people are very depressed and anxious, like I was as a teenager, and so that energy needs to be poured somewhere.
Do you think part of it is also that we're so prosperous that people just don't have legitimate things to complain about? Because I feel like a lot of our problems even the problems that I complain about on social media, like, oh my God, I can't believe this liberal blue check tweeted this. That does not matter in 95, probably 99% of the world.
Yeah. I think we are, because we have the foundation built, because the world, like, the floor is not crumbling beneath us, even though, people will say it is. Yeah. The floor is not crumbling beneath us. And so we do have to come up for reasons for why we feel so bad. Yeah. And I'm not here to dismiss the fact that people feel so bad. I think it's related to our phones and social media.
Oh, for sure.
But at the time, there were all these people who, wanted a cause. And so I think that's when things got really crazy. And I got suctioned into this rabbit hole over the course of a year. And I was one of those blue-haired feminists. Like, literally,
did you dye your hair blue?
I dyed I was kind of lame. I dyed the under part of my hair blue.
Catholic schoolgirls can't even commit to dyeing your whole head blue.
I didn't even bleach it. I just I don't know.
So is that faded blue streak in the back?
Yeah.
I need to see a picture of this after.
Yeah. We'll find something. I thought I was so cool. But at one point, I did let my friends cut my hair, and it got all the way up to here. Oh, and I had
the fringe. Yeah. Tell me you didn't.
I did. There are pictures of me from this time.
I don't even know if I want to see those ones.
I don't know that anyone wants to see. I mean, I think people actually would want to see them. They're pretty funny. Yeah. But behind that haircut and the fact that I was policing other people's speech in classes. And
wait, you would do that in real life?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
I know.
I'm not trying to invalidate
only
you.
For a little bit. I was like, I can't believe this girl has this opinion, and like, how teenagers act today.
I was too introverted to go to do that. Yeah. Maybe if I had like more guts, I might have spoken up about something in class, but I was more of like an online Tumblr warrior.
I brought this into real life.
The haircut is real commitment.
I did a feminist protest at my school by like disobeying their dress code. We don't have to get too into that. And, I, from the outside, looked like, just this angry 15-year-old, however old I was. I think I was 15. But internally, I was committing psychological warfare on myself. Mm-hmm. And I think people don't realize that about a lot of the teenagers that we mock, is that however harshly they're speaking to you, however much they're policing you on your speech. Oh my gosh. I terrorized myself. Yeah. And I mean, I got to such a dark place as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old by the time that I like decided to wake up, I got to such a dark place that I couldn't do it anymore. Like, genuinely, I got to a place where I was in the belly of the whale, and I was like, I need something to relieve me from this like constant feeling that I'm a bad person, that I, am someday going to commit some kind of microaggression against somebody and hurt them. Like, I just was so ashamed of myself for no reason.
Like white guilt?
Probably,
Okay.
yeah. Probably. I remember
such a plague in today's society.
I think his name was Michael Brown. Those were like the really big protests of the 2015 wave for BLM.
I remember I was in like 8th grade maybe when that happened.
I couldn't go to sleep.
Really?
I was up crying. Just like I felt the weight of the world as a teenager, and I was so mean to myself. And I got to a point where, my life was just pure negativity all the time. And that's a really hard place to be in. And I think so many people are in that place right now, which is why so much of what I want to do with my life is speak to those people, because I know that I was there, and something shifted in me because I decided that my life was too important to spend being miserable all the time, and I got therapy. Great. That's step one. And I changed up my friend group, whether it was intentional or not, right? I suddenly had a changing of the guards, and all of these people in my life where we were all dragging each other down, I suddenly had friends who were laughing, right? And making jokes. And it was like the sun came out in my life for the first time in a year. And they weren't political, right? One of them even felt like I had hurt her during my time as an SJW, right? And that really, really pained me, because I thought that entire time that I was exemplifying what it meant to be a good person, right? And so coming to the realization that I was actually making it really hard for the people around me to be happy, that is something that like totally challenged my worldview and started, putting a crack in the window. And then that, like, within 6 months, I took, a sledgehammer to the glass and kind of shattered all of it, just by reassessing what my different beliefs were. And I questioned all of it. It was kind of like drinking from a faucet, right? And those YouTube videos you talked about, like, did those feel like kind of just the most alluring, exciting thing ever? Because
for me, because I felt so alone in my beliefs in my school. So it was not out of the ordinary for the white guys in my wrestling team to be conservative. That was not questioned. It was out of the ordinary for me to identify as a conservative back then. And I actually joined the Black Student Union in my school. Out of like 1,200 kids, there was probably like 30 Black people in the school, and half those kids were related. There was like, they're all cousins basically. So there wasn't a lot of representation. I felt like I wanted more Black friends. Growing up, being biracial, I felt like, I want to reach to that other side, and being in like a white community or white high school, I was like, pretty desperate to making Black friends and Black female friends specifically. And they did not really like me when they found out my politics. They really did not like me. I actually got kicked out of VSU my freshman year, which was
for your political beliefs.
I feel like it was a combination of my political beliefs and how I became so outspoken about them.
Gotcha.
If I had just stayed silent, or if maybe I had only discussed my political beliefs within the Black Student Union, maybe they would have just like told me to shut up. But I was outspoken like within the school, and I think they took issue with that. Especially when I was really taking a stand against their obsession with like microaggressions. I was like, there are much more important things to be worrying about. Like, I just felt like I had already outgrown their goals as soon as I got there. So they were just done with me. That's fine. I didn't align with their messaging, but it was crazy that the Black Student Union was political, because I didn't join it to be political. I joined it to make Black friends.
Yeah.
But they only wanted Black friends that thought like them. Right. So
and I think a lot of that kind of discourse, the reason why it's bad is not because it's inaccurately pointing out that, you know, someone might be behaving towards you poorly, but it's not offering a solution that's internal, right? I've been reading some stuff on Stoicism, and a lot of what they talk about is how you can only, like, you should only worry about the things within your control, right? And I think that that's part of why this ideology makes people so miserable. It's because it's constantly pushing out all of the action onto other people who are unwilling to do anything, right? If someone is truly hateful, do you really think that telling them that they're hateful is going to change their mind?
It's not enough to just be not racist. We must be actively anti-racist, Maggie. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there are some extreme examples. Like, have you heard of Daryl Davis?
No, I haven't.
He is, I hope I'm getting his name right, but he is this Black man who goes and meets with Ku Klux Klan members, and he has converted, like, I think dozens, just by being friends with them and basically saying, like, stop being hateful, but through building relationships, not just shouting in their face and shaming them, but like through actually befriending Klan members, which he's better than me. I cannot do that. I literally cannot walk into the belly of the beast like that. So that's an extreme example. But that's, again, that's not what these radical, extreme people on both sides, that's not what they're doing when they're reaching, quote unquote, reaching to the other side of the aisle to make their case. They're just kind of shaming them. And also, a little bit back to that point, when the situation's not going to be solved when it's not reaching people who are willing or just are not able to do anything. I think a lot of these kids who are very into politics and very into social justice activism specifically are very unhappy because the internet has brought on this crazy phenomenon where we are just so aware of every horrible thing going on in the world. I don't think we were ever, like, the human brain was probably not ever meant to consume this much information. Basically, So when there's protests going on in Iran, there's protests going on in Hong Kong, there's impending World War III.
We're seeing
there's
videos
police brutality everywhere.
We're seeing videos of extreme brutality.
Crazy. We were not meant to see this stuff. And so I think I do empathize a lot with these kids who see all these videos of injustice, and maybe they're manipulated and maybe they're fake news, and there's a lot of, I would say, misleading content out there that would make you believe one thing over the other. And I understand why they're angry, and I understand why they feel so helpless.
Yeah, I think what we're hitting at is that a lot of these ideologies don't actually give them tools on how to cope with these things and how to conquer the beasts, right? Like,
I gotta take the white pill.
You know, when I started making my political transformation, you want to know what really did it for me? Like, what really changed my life was listening to Jordan Peterson. I know a lot of people think that he's only for white guys, but me as this, like, you know, nerdy girl that was a screaming banshee leftist, I listened to Jordan Peterson, and something about the ownership mentality and the responsibility mentality really spoke to me, because by that point I had been consuming all of this content, constantly fearful of the world, constantly thinking that, you know, I was going to get attacked for being a woman or something, which wasn't happening. And like, I needed someone to slap me in the face and be like, listen, the world is a scary place. Yes. It's chaotic. Yes. But you have so much control over one thing, and it's called your life. You have control over how you react to situations. You have control of how you're doing in your classes in college. So while I was in college, I was getting straight A's because I wanted to take control over my future, and my destiny. I didn't want to be a victim of circumstances. Not that the circumstances were stacked against me, but all these people were constantly telling me that they were, you know? And I'm sure you can relate to that.
I definitely can.
Yeah.
And I would just, I guess, a general message to anyone who would be watching or listening, and to myself and to you a little bit as well. I used to feel shame about kind of doing a 180, going from kind of like, liberal. I wouldn't even consider myself liberal because I didn't even understand politics at this age, but like reactionary. Reactionary left to reactionary right now to, I think, truly at least beginning to understand politics. And I used to feel ashamed of that transition because, like you said, how did I believe that? Like, literally, how did I believe that?
Yeah.
But that reminds me of the founder of FEE, Leonard Reed, who literally did a 180 greater than you or I could really ever even imagine.
Right. I mean, so he was working for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in the 1930s, the early 1930s. What was happening at this point? The Great Depression.
the Great Depression, the New Deal. I mean, this is basically, we're looking at the origins of modern monetary theory, which we know today as advocates of the free market and liberty is completely wrong. Centrally planned economy is completely wrong. It's completely authoritarian and tyrannical. But he worked furthering this centrally planned economy and furthering the kind of collectivist goals of those such as FDR, and then he did a complete 180 and created this whole thing.
The way it happened, he went to go bully someone who was not getting in line with FDR's New Deal, right? So someone who was speaking out publicly against New Deal policies, and at the time, it was like, everyone's behind this,
Sounded great on paper.
Kind of similar to how in COVID, when we locked down, everyone was like, yes, spending bills, like, let's go.
And bullying people who refused or who were just skeptic. Not even like outright refused, but just skeptic.
Right. So, this is a time period where it's really not good. It's really not good to be an advocate of the free market because everybody hates you, you know, and all of this bad stuff is happening. And I'm sure the people in that day and age were extremely, extremely black-pilled about the future,
Can't blame them.
I can't blame them either. Leonard Reed walks into a meeting with this guy, and the guy listens to him calmly, hears what he has to say, and then refutes every single one of his points. And Leonard Reed walked out of the room a changed man. Goes on to found the Foundation for Economic Education, which has been spreading the message of free markets for 76 years. So even the most, even the craziest leftist out there could become the fiercest defender of free markets and freedom, right? And so that's kind of why we wanted to do this podcast, because I think there are a lot of podcasts out there on these subjects with people that are brilliant, but there is an audience out there that hasn't been initiated yet. And a lot of them are girls, and a lot of them don't have a role model. Not that we're role models, but Olivia's a role model.
Who said that? I'm not saying that. But no, you're right. It's a lot. There's certain demographics like females, like young people, like minorities who just haven't been reached yet. And whether we're a role model or not, I just want to be there for people to listen and look to and be like, yo, she used to think the way I do, and now she thinks this way. Let's see what she has to say.
Right. And I think also, a larger point that I want to make is that, I'm happier, honestly, not being in the mindset that I was at 15. I think everyone is happier now than when they were 15.
There's a lot of hormones going on back then.
That could have led to some of my poor choices. But I think a lot of young girls and young boys are falling into this trap of disempowerment, right? And because of that, they're going to make choices as though they are not in control of their own lives and creators of their own destiny.
We could apply that to so many things that are going wrong with today's society, which I'm sure we can get into in later episodes, but it has changed the culture. I think that our generation, being like Generation Z and even like older people like millennials, they have a defeatist attitude, and I can't fully blame them.
Yeah.
Because, you know, generations and generations leading up to this have kind of allowed, you know, paved the way for this to happen just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't our generation that put modern monetary that was such a tongue twister. Modern monetary theory in place.
Yeah.
It wasn't us who did that. So this has been a long time coming. I think it's up to people like us, though, to stand up and be like, we're breaking out of the re-education camps. We're making our own. We're out of the gulag. We're undoctrinating ourselves and hopefully other people.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic place to wrap.
I agree. I wish I could do this show from Atlanta all the time, because this is super fun, just like sitting across from you on the set. So hopefully I get to come down here and do it more often. But in the meantime, we will have more episodes coming out on the YouTube channel. So please subscribe to that and find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you may listen to your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Rondeau Olivia. That's RONDEAULIVIA. And tell them.
And you can find me on Twitter at Liberty Anders, LIBERTYANDERS.
I love that username so much.
I hate it. I want to change it so bad. I want to change it so bad. So if anyone has any ideas for a better username.
Maggie, I have to tell you something, though, because my backup account, I named it Liberty Rondo because I was inspired by Liberty Anders.
Yeah, this friendship has been years in the making.
Now that I know that you hate it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to change it. But anyways, thank you for watching or listening to our first episode. That's awesome.
And please leave a comment if you have any questions that you want us to answer next time we get together to do a podcast, which will be very soon.
All right, guys, stay out of the gulags.
See you later.